Doing a PhD looking at the effect of trade agreements on medicines access. I was looking at AIDS medicines and I was looking at Africa, but after looking at it for about 5 years, the one conclusion I came out with was these so-called free trade agreements can be death to a lot of people, literally. They can literally be death to a lot of people by putting the essential medicines that people need out of their hands.
In 1995, the World Trade Organization was formed, and intellectual property was one of its three fundamental pillars through what's called the TRIPS agreement, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. This was considered to be a major revolution in global intellectual property protection and global intellectual property regulation. In the Fortune 500 in 2001, the top 10 pharmaceutical companies made more profit than all other 490 companies combined. And if you can understand that statistic, you can understand how big this industry we're talking about is, and think of the profits used there and how many of them were channeled back into lobbying. So the WTO adopted a new declaration called the Doha Declaration that clarified the right of countries to access generic medicines. On the back of this, major funders started to buy generic AIDS medicines, and millions more people are alive today who wouldn't have been otherwise, who couldn't access these medicines because they got cheaper generic copies of antiretroviral AIDS medicines. So just as form shifting had worked for them in the past, they did it again. This time, their form shifted from the WTO to bilateral and regional free trade agreements. Free trade agreements either between one country in the United States or free trade agreements between many countries in the United States. And that's what the TPP is. That brings us to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. It's one of many free trade agreements that have come after the formation of the WTO in the last 15 years. And each of these agreements, I think the United States has signed about 17 of these with different countries. Each of them increases patent protection beyond what the WTO prescribes. So where the WTO is called the TRIPS agreement, these free trade agreements are called TRIPS Plus. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is a very good example of the TRIPS Plus agreement. But we do have a need for access to medicines, and we do have what's called PharmAC, which, amongst other things, has been very good at negotiating cheaper prices on medicines, often by either buying generics or using the threat of buying generics as a negotiating tool to bring down the price. So PharmAC has been internationally recognised as being very good for this. And I think from my perspective, that should make us concerned about a couple of aspects of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. One of these is that, as we've seen through the WTO's TRIPS agreement, through the numerous TRIPS Plus agreements and their implementation in various countries, higher IP protection, higher patent protection leads to higher medicines prices. Not in and of itself per se, but because of what it does to generic competition. The biggest way to bring down prices in any market is to increase the competition, right? Increase that innovation there. Generics have been phenomenally successful in this. For one example, with AIDS medicines, the price went down from around $15,000 per patient per year for a course of antiretrovirals to $62 per patient per year. That was over about a 1-year period after generic competition was introduced. The TPP is just the latest chapter in an ongoing saga of trying to increase monopolies within the major pharmaceutical industry and decrease competition with generics that lowers prices. For this reason, I don't think anyone should be too surprised that these negotiations are taking place in secrecy, because when they were taking place in slightly more transparent ways at the UN or at the WTO, Big Pharma learned they couldn't get what they wanted.